On December 2nd, 2023, in Aiken County, South Carolina, 30-year-old Jamilla Shanae Smith placed a frantic 911 call. On the other end, dispatchers heard the sound of an argument, Jamilla's voice pleading, a man shouting, and then sudden silence. The man was later identified as Gabriel Harmon, her former partner. When deputies arrived at Jamilla's residence, she was nowhere to be found. What followed was a search that uncovered disturbing traces of violence, but few immediate answers. The investigation revealed a history of domestic incidents between Jamilla and Daniel, raising questions about missed warning signs and delayed intervention. As authorities reconstructed the final minutes of her call, the picture became more complex. A relationship once built on trust, now consumed by control and fear. Behind every timeline, every report, was a question that lingered. How did a young mother's plea for help turn into a case that shocked an entire community?
Also making headlines this evening, an update on the murder investigation of a missing woman. Aiken deputies say they have found Jamilla Smith's body. Investigators found the remains in a wooded area near the 2100 block of Silver Bluff Road. Her remains were then positively identified by the Aiken County coroner. Smith was reported missing in December. 2 men have been arrested in connection with her death, one charged with murder and another with accessory after the fact. Jamilla was 30 years old.
Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Jamilla Shanae Smith was born and raised in Aiken County, South Carolina. She grew up in a close-knit family known for their strong community involvement and family values. Friends describe her as dependable, hardworking, and always willing to help others. From a young age, she developed a reputation for being responsible and compassionate, traits that carried into her adult life. She lived near her relatives and maintained regular contact with her extended family, who often helped her with her children. As she grew older, Jamilla worked several jobs to support her household, including part-time shifts in retail and caregiving. She was known for her reliability and work ethic, often juggling long hours while ensuring her children's needs came first. By her late 20s, Jamilla was a mother of 2 young children. Her friends and relatives frequently mention her deep devotion to her kids, noting that she placed their well-being above all else. Despite financial struggles, she managed to create a stable environment for them. She often spoke about her hopes to provide a better future, one free from instability and hardship. Her life revolved around her family. She attended school functions, organized birthday parties, and maintained routines that reflected her protective instincts. Those close to her described Jamilla as nurturing and family-oriented, the type of mother who never left her children unattended and always planned ahead. Outside of motherhood, Jamilla had personal aspirations of peace and stability. After experiencing emotional difficulties in prior relationships, she reportedly sought calm and partnership, someone who could bring balance to her life. Friends said she often spoke about wanting a man who understood her struggles and supported her as an equal. In her words, she wanted peace, not perfection. She longed for a partner who could help her build a secure home environment. This desire for stability would eventually lead her to reconnect with a man who initially seemed to embody those qualities, Gabriel Harmon. Jamilla met Gabriel Harmon through mutual acquaintances in Aiken. He was a familiar face in the area, a local man known for his confident personality and charm. The relationship began casually, with shared outings and public affection that gave the appearance of a loving partnership. In the early stages, Jamilla appeared happy. She referred to Daniel as her ride or die on social media, a phrase that reflected loyalty and trust. Those around her noticed how she spoke about him with optimism, believing that he might finally be someone who understood her. However, as the months went by, the dynamics began to change. Small disagreements evolved into controlling behavior. Daniel started questioning her whereabouts, checking her phone, and monitoring her social media activity. Friends later reported that Jamilla became increasingly quiet about her personal life. The affection and trust that once defined their relationship slowly transformed into control and intimidation. Daniel Gabriel Harmon was in his early 30s and lived in the same region of Aiken County. Those who knew him described him as charismatic but unpredictable. He had a history of anger management issues and a criminal record that included past domestic violence and assault charges. In his early adulthood, Harmon's relationships followed a consistent pattern. They began with intense charm and devotion, but often ended in conflict and volatility. Several acquaintances mentioned that Daniel struggled with jealousy and insecurity, frequently accusing partners of disloyalty without evidence. In his relationship with Jamilla, Daniel exhibited a growing pattern of control. He began limiting her communication with friends and family, insisting on knowing her daily movements and showing up unannounced at her workplace. According to reports, he regularly accused her of cheating and became enraged when she didn't answer his calls immediately. There were also signs of manipulation through self-harm threats. He reportedly told Jamilla he would hurt himself if she ever left him. Over time, Jamilla's confidence and independence declined. Friends noticed she became isolated and withdrawn. By late 2023, the situation had become violent. Family members began seeing bruises on Jamilla's arms and neck. She dismissed questions by saying she fell or bumped into something, but her relatives suspected the truth. Her demeanor changed. She became quieter, less visible online, and more hesitant to attend social gatherings. Co-workers describe her as distracted, and she occasionally showed up to work visibly shaken. The relationship continued to deteriorate as Daniel's jealousy escalated. Minor disagreements turned into shouting matches. On several occasions, neighbors reportedly heard arguments coming from Jamilla's home. In private, Jamilla confided in a few friends that she was scared. She mentioned that Daniel had threatened her and that she was considering leaving him for good. Despite her fear, she hesitated because of potential retaliation and concern for her children's safety. Jamilla's fears were not unfounded. Police records indicate that multiple domestic disturbance calls were made involving Daniel Harmon in 2023. In one particular incident in November 2023, Jamilla told authorities that Daniel had strangled her during an argument. The police noted visible injuries on her neck, scratches on Daniel's arms, and blood traces under his fingernails. Despite the severity of the event, Jamilla later hesitated to press charges, citing fear and pressure from Daniel. Law enforcement viewed the case as part of a continuing cycle of abuse. However, without consistent cooperation from the victim, the process stalled. In early 2024, Jamilla expressed close friends that she was ready to end the relationship permanently. She reportedly started looking for new housing and mentioned wanting to date others in the future. When Daniel found out, his behavior became more erratic. He allegedly told her he would rather die than let her go. He began showing up uninvited at her job and calling repeatedly throughout the day. Friends later described this period as the start of stalking and harassment. Jamilla began taking precautions, locking doors, changing routines, and avoiding certain areas. Despite these efforts, Daniel's fixation continued to intensify, setting the stage for the violence that would soon follow. In the weeks leading up to December 2nd, 2023, Jamilla Shanae Smith's life had become increasingly tense. Friends and family described a growing sense of fear and unease. Daniel Gabriel Harmon, her ex-boyfriend, had been calling her repeatedly and showing up at her home without warning. Each visit escalated the anxiety that had already taken hold of Jamilla's daily life. According to those close to her, Jamilla had begun keeping her phone beside her at night. She would wake up multiple times to check for missed calls or messages, fearing that Harmon might appear unannounced. Despite their tumultuous breakup, he continued to contact her, often alternating between pleas for reconciliation and threats that left her shaken. By late November, Jamilla confided in her mother, Tina McCraw, and her sister that she was done this time. Those words, spoken with finality that worried her family, marked a turning point. She had made the decision to cut all ties with Harmon permanently. But even then, her family sensed that he wasn't ready to let go. Friends and co-workers would later tell investigators that Jamilla had mentioned getting a restraining order. She reportedly looked into the process and discussed it with at least 2 people close to her. However, there's no record confirming whether she officially filed one. The lack of documentation became a critical gap in what could have been a protective measure. Aiken County investigators later noted that no paperwork or court filing related to Harmon existed before her disappearance. This uncertainty left questions about whether Jamilla underestimated the danger or she was still processing the best way to handle a volatile situation. Despite visible signs of stress, Jamilla continued going to work and taking care of her 2 children. Friends say she tried to maintain normalcy, attending her daughter's school events and running errands around town. Outwardly, she appeared to be managing, but those closest to her said she was growing increasingly nervous and watchful, locking doors even during the day. On December 1st, 2023, just 1 day before Jamilla vanished, several neighbors reported seeing a familiar car near her property, a vehicle matching the description of Harmon's. According to later interviews, one neighbor told police they saw a man standing outside near Jamilla's driveway around 9 p.m., but they didn't think much of it at the time. Investigators would later confirm that Harmon had been seen near her house multiple times in the final 24 hours. Surveillance footage from a nearby store placed his car traveling in the direction of Old Jackson Highway the evening before she went missing. Meanwhile, a friend of Harmon's came forward and told authorities that he had recently expressed anger over Jamilla ending things for good. According to the statement, Harmon allegedly said, "She's not going to leave me this time." The remark would later take on chilling significance. Jamilla spent most of that Saturday, December 2nd, at home. She spoke to her mother around 6 p.m., mentioning that she planned to relax for the night. There were no signs that anything unusual was about to occur until hours later, when her final moments were captured in a desperate call to 911. At approximately 8:48 p.m. on December 2nd, 2023, dispatchers in Aiken County received a frantic 911 call from Jamilla Smith's home on Old Jackson Highway. The call lasted just under a minute. In it, Jamilla can be heard screaming, "He broke in. He's chasing me." The dispatcher attempted to calm her, asking for her location and whether she was in danger. Moments later, a male voice, later believed to be Harmon, shouted, "Get in the car," followed by the sound of an engine revving. The call ended abruptly. Attempts to redial went unanswered. Deputies were dispatched to Jamilla's residence within minutes. When they arrived, the scene was quiet. There was no sign of forced entry on the front door, but one window appeared partially open. Officers knocked repeatedly with no response. Outside, Jamilla's car, a black Dodge Charger, was missing. Her phone was discovered in the yard, smashed beyond repair. Tire marks were visible on the gravel driveway, suggesting a hurried departure. Inside the house, nothing appeared stolen, but certain details stood out. Her purse was still on the kitchen table, and her 2 children were with relatives at night, a decision that likely saved their lives. Deputies conducted an immediate perimeter search, but found no trace of Jamilla or Harmon. The situation quickly escalated from a welfare check to an active missing person investigation. By early morning on December 3rd, Jamilla's mother, Tina McCraw, officially reported her daughter missing. Within hours, word spread across social media. Friends, family, and community members began sharing posts with Jamilla's photo, describing her as last seen wearing a gray hoodie and black leggings. Flyers soon appeared across Aiken County, extending into neighboring areas of South Carolina and Georgia. Community volunteers organized search efforts in wooded areas and near creeks surrounding Old Jackson Highway. Aiken County Sheriff's deputies conducted a full sweep of Jamilla's residence. Evidence collected included a set of keys left on the porch, shoe prints near the open window, and the broken cell phone. Investigators traced the last outgoing call to 911. They then began the search for her vehicle, broadcasting its description, a black 2018 Dodge Charger, to law enforcement agencies across the region. Given the circumstances, the case was reclassified from a missing person to a possible kidnapping within 24 hours. As investigators pieced together the timeline, all leads pointed toward Gabriel Harmon. His phone records indicated he was near Jamilla's home around the time of the 911 call. When deputies attempted to locate him, he was already gone. A warrant for his arrest was issued. Authorities expanded the search to include Harmon's known associates and places he was believed to frequent. Despite multiple attempts, he remained at large in the days following Jamilla's disappearance. Family members publicly pleaded for him to turn himself in. Law enforcement described him as armed and dangerous, warning the public not to approach if seen. Following several weeks of investigation into the disappearance of Jamilla Shanae Smith, 30, law enforcement in Aiken, South Carolina, tracked down Gabriel Harmon, her boyfriend and the primary suspect in her disappearance. Authorities had received multiple leads from community members and phone data analysis that placed Harmon near Smith's last known location on the evening she vanished. Officers located Harmon at a residence on Whiskey Road, a property connected to one of his acquaintances. Upon arrival, deputies established a perimeter and ordered Harmon to exit the house. For nearly an hour, he refused to comply, resulting in a brief standoff. Negotiators were called to the scene, and after continued communication, Harmon finally surrendered without incident. He was taken into custody and initially charged with domestic violence and kidnapping, both linked to previous reports of abuse filed by Smith before her disappearance. Inside the home, deputies discovered clothing believed to belong to Jamilla, along with a set of car keys later matched to her missing vehicle. When detectives questioned Harmon about Jamilla's whereabouts, he remained silent. According to the incident report, Harmon declined to cooperate, refused to answer basic questions, and repeatedly invoked his right to remain silent. Investigators noted his demeanor as calm, detached, and showing no visible remorse. During the initial vehicle search of Harmon's car, forensic technicians found bloodstains in the trunk. The stains were later confirmed through DNA analysis to match Jamilla's blood type, further deepening suspicion that she had met with foul play. In the days that followed, Harmon appeared before a magistrate for a bond hearing. The courtroom was filled with Jamilla's relatives, friends, and members of the local community. Prosecutors presented evidence suggesting a strong likelihood that Harmon was involved in her disappearance and possible death. Assistant Solicitor Emily Greer described Harmon as a danger to community and to anyone who might cross him, citing prior domestic incidents, witness statements about violent behavior, and his refusal to cooperate with investigators. The prosecution also referenced surveillance footage showing Harmon purchasing cleaning materials in the days after Jamilla was last seen. Given the seriousness of the allegations, Harmon was denied bond. The judge ruled that his release posed a significant threat to public safety and the integrity of the ongoing investigation. He was remanded to Aiken County Detention Center pending further proceedings. With Harmon in custody but no sign of Jamilla, her family continued to search for answers. Over the next several months, the Smith family organized community searches throughout Aiken County, focusing on wooded and rural areas where they believed Jamilla's body might have been hidden. Volunteers, including local residents, off-duty officers, and search dogs, combed fields, ponds, and forested trails. Flyers were distributed across South Carolina and Georgia, and her disappearance gained increasing media attention. Despite these efforts, no trace of Jamilla was found during the winter or early spring months. Law enforcement maintained that the case remained active. The Aiken County Sheriff's Office collaborated with the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, and used drone surveillance and ground-penetrating radar to examine potential burial sites. As the months passed, Jamilla's family grew frustrated with the lack of progress, but continued to hold prayer vigils and press briefings to keep public attention on the case. In May 2024, nearly 6 months after her disappearance, investigators received a call from a land surveyor working near Silver Bluff Road, an area approximately 10 miles south of Aiken. The worker reported a suspicious odor and partial remains visible in a wooded section near a dirt trail. Deputies and forensic teams arrived on scene and secured the area. After careful excavation and analysis, the remains were confirmed to be human. Items found at the scene included fragments of clothing matching descriptions provided by Jamilla's family, as well as jewelry later identified as hers. A forensic pathologist conducted an autopsy, confirming that the remains belonged to Jamilla Shanae Smith. The cause of death was ruled as multiple gunshot wounds to the head. Additionally, Investigators found evidence of blunt force trauma to the upper body, consistent with struggle that likely occurred before the fatal shooting. The discovery transformed the case from a missing person investigation into a homicide investigation. Law enforcement officials described the findings as deeply disturbing and vowed to pursue additional arrests related to concealment of Jamilla's body. As forensic evidence was processed, new leads emerged linking Harmon to possible accomplices. In the following weeks, 2 additional suspects were arrested: Brian Alexander Hampton Jr., age 28, Clyde James Henley II, age 31. Both men were charged as accessories after the fact of murder. According to investigators, they allegedly helped Harmon dispose of Jamilla's body and conceal physical evidence after crime. Phone records revealed that Harmon had contacted both men shortly after Jamilla's disappearance. Surveillance footage from a convenience store captured the trio purchasing cleaning supplies, garbage bags, and gloves on the same night Jamilla was last seen alive. Investigators also obtained receipts from local hardware stores showing purchases of bleach and plastic sheeting. Authorities stated that Hampton and Henley were aware Jamilla was already dead at the time they assisted Harmon. Detectives believe they helped transport the body from Harmon's vehicle to the wooded area off Silver Bluff Road, where she was later discovered. During questioning, both men provided conflicting statements. Hampton initially denied involvement, but later admitted to being present when Harmon needed help moving something heavy. Henley refused to answer questions after consulting with an attorney. In a press briefing following the arrests, Sheriff Michael Hunt described the case as one that reveals deep premeditation and deliberate concealment. Investigators believe Harmon planned the attack in advance, possibly after learning that Jamilla intended to leave him permanently and had been communicating with a family member about relocating. Digital evidence, including deleted text messages recovered from Harmon's phone, indicated threats made toward Jamilla in the weeks before her death. One message read, "You'll regret leaving me like that." The prosecution team announced that additional charges, including murder and obstruction of justice, would be filed against Harmon. Prosecutors planned to pursue life imprisonment without parole, citing the severity and premeditated nature of the crime. As of mid-2025, the case remains in the pre-trial stage, with hearings ongoing in Aiken County Circuit Court. Jamilla's family continues to advocate for justice, attending each court appearance and urging the public to remember her story. The arrests of Harmon, Hampton, and Henley closed months of uncertainty, but exposed the depth of the violence and deceit surrounding Jamilla's disappearance. Law enforcement continues to investigate whether additional individuals may have knowledge of or participated in the cover-up. The forensic investigation into the disappearance and death of Jamilla Shanae Smith, a 30-year-old mother of 2 from Aiken, South Carolina, revealed a meticulously constructed case supported by extensive physical, digital, and ballistic evidence. Authorities began by focusing on Gabriel Harmon, her boyfriend and primary suspect, after multiple inconsistencies emerged in his statements and the discovery of incriminating material. Investigators impounded Harmon's Dodge Charger, the same vehicle Jamilla was last seen entering before her disappearance. A forensic sweep revealed traces of blood inside the trunk and undercarriage. Initial luminol testing confirmed the presence of human blood, later matched through DNA analysis to Jamilla. The blood evidence indicated attempts to clean or conceal biological material, pointing to post-crime activity. Additionally, carpet fibers from the trunk were microscopically matched to those recovered at the wooded burial site off Silver Bluff Road. The fibers provided a critical link between the vehicle and the crime scene, strengthening the chain of evidence that placed Jamilla's body in Harmon's car before disposal. Forensic teams retrieved deleted text messages from Harmon's cell phone. The recovered conversations showed increasing tension in the days leading to Jamilla's disappearance, including arguments about her decision to leave him and return to her family. One recovered message read, "You're not walking out on me again." The timing and tone of these texts painted a clear picture of escalating control and hostility. Further analysis of GPS data from Harmon's phone placed him in the Silver Bluff Road area around midnight on the night Jamilla was reported missing. The data showed repeated pings from his phone consistent with stopping for several minutes at an undeveloped wooded tract of land, the same location where Jamilla's body was later recovered. The digital trail formed a precise timeline that aligned with surveillance footage and witness accounts, closing the gap between suspicion and confirmation. During a search of Harmon's residence, investigators discovered a handgun hidden inside a drawer in his garage. Ballistic comparison tests conducted by state forensic analysts confirmed that bullets recovered near Jamilla's remains matched this weapon. The firearm was legally registered to Harmon, eliminating ambiguity about ownership. Investigators noted that spent shell casings found at the burial site exhibited identical markings to those from test-fired rounds, providing irrefutable evidence of the gun's involvement in the homicide. The recovered weapon became one of the strongest physical links tying Harmon to Jamilla's killing. Authorities also reviewed a 911 call placed from a nearby resident reporting gunshots and a woman screaming late at night in the Silver Bluff Road area. Through voice analysis technology, experts compared the male voice heard shouting in the background to Harmon's recorded speech patterns from police interviews. The results identified a high probability match, confirming that Harmon's voice was the one captured on an emergency call. This audio evidence provided a real-time corroboration of the attack, placing Harmon audibly at the scene during the estimated time of death. Following the completion of the forensic review, investigators presented a comprehensive case file to the Aiken County Solicitor's Office, leading to multiple felony charges against Daniel Harmon and 2 co-defendants believed to have assisted after the crime. Harmon was formally charged with murder, kidnapping, and domestic violence of a high and aggravated nature. These charges reflected not only the act of killing, but also the premeditated nature of the crime and the history of abuse that preceded it. In addition, prosecutors uncovered evidence suggesting Harmon's involvement in narcotics trafficking, prompting possible narcotics charges under a separate investigation. This parallel case revealed that Harmon's criminal activity extended beyond domestic abuse, forming a broader pattern of coercion, control, and violence. 2 individuals, identified in court documents as co-defendants, faced charges of accessory after the fact to murder. Investigators alleged that both assisted Harmon in concealing evidence and misleading authorities following Jamilla's death. Testimony and phone records suggested that one co-defendant helped transport cleaning materials and dispose of evidence, while another provided Harmon with misleading alibis. Prosecutors stated that both individuals knowingly participated after learning of the homicide. Court filings revealed text messages and call logs between Harmon and his accomplices in the hours following the crime, showing efforts to destroy digital traces and coordinate false statements. The state intends to prosecute these accessory charges separately, citing them as essential to revealing the full scope of the cover-up. As of the most recent update, Daniel Harmon remains held without bond at the Aiken County Detention Center. The presiding judge denied bail, citing both flight risk and severity of the evidence presented. Court filings indicate that the solicitor's office will seek life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, given the premeditated and violent nature of the offense. Prosecutors also indicated that aggravating factors, including prior domestic violence incidents and attempts to conceal the crime, would influence sentencing recommendations. The trial remains pending, with motions ongoing regarding evidence admissibility and digital forensics testimony. The murder of Jamilla Smith sent shockwaves through the Aiken community. Within days of her body being recovered, residents organized vigils, memorial walks, and fundraisers in her honor. Community members gathered at the site of her disappearance, lighting candles and leaving flowers near Silver Bluff Road. The tragedy reignited statewide discussions about the prevalence of domestic violence in South Carolina, a state consistently ranked among the highest in domestic homicide rates. Advocacy groups used Jamilla's case to draw attention to systemic gaps in victim protection, emphasizing the need for stronger restraining order enforcement and more accessible crisis intervention services. Jamilla's family, particularly her mother and sister, spoke publicly about missed warning signs and their efforts to encourage her to leave the abusive relationship. In interviews, they described patterns of isolation and intimidation that had worsened over time. In her memory, the family established the Jamilla Smith Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting victims of domestic abuse, providing emergency relocation resources, and educating the public about warning behaviors in toxic relationships. The foundation has since partnered with regional shelters and law enforcement to promote early intervention programs. National outlets such as People, ABC News, and Crime Online, along with multiple local South Carolina stations, covered the investigation extensively. Reporters detailed the sequence of events, court proceedings, and the broader implications for domestic violence prevention in the state. The coverage amplified renewed calls for legislative reform, urging the creation of statewide protocols for tracking repeat domestic offenders and expanding support for survivors. Through the combined efforts of forensic science, digital investigation, and relentless legal pursuit, the case of Jamilla Shanae Smith stands as a detailed example of how evidence, when meticulously assembled, can expose hidden truths and deliver justice for victims silenced by violence. The case of Jamilla Shanae Smith illustrates a tragically common pattern in domestic violence, a gradual escalation from emotional manipulation to fatal violence. What began as arguments behind closed doors developed into full-fledged physical assaults and threats, each one more severe than the last. Early reports suggest that Gabriel Harmon maintained control through isolation and psychological dominance, slowly cutting Jamilla off from her family and friends. Over time, this control turned physical. Neighbors later recalled hearing loud confrontations, but no one reported them to law enforcement until after the November 2024 incident. Police records confirmed that there was at least one prior reported domestic assault, during which Jamilla claimed Harmon had hit her and destroyed her phone to prevent her from calling for help. The case was documented but not pursued aggressively. By January 2025, Harmon's possessiveness intensified. He allegedly tracked Jamilla's movements, monitored her social media activity, and threatened her as she spoke to other men. This progression from control to violence reflects the well-established domestic abuse pattern, where emotional abuse serves as a precursor to physical harm. When Jamilla finally made the decision to leave him, a moment experts identify as the most dangerous phase for victims, Harmon's threats became action. The lack of swift intervention by authorities in the earlier stages allowed this escalation to continue unchecked. What could have been addressed through early enforcement and protective measures instead evolved into a lethal outcome. Jamilla's murder highlights several systemic failures in the domestic violence response framework. Law enforcement handling of her previous assault report shows delayed arrests and inconsistent follow-up, common issues in such cases. When police first responded to Jamilla's November 2024 report, Harmon had already left the scene. An arrest warrant was reportedly issued days later, but he was not taken into custody until weeks after. During that time, Harmon continued contacting Jamilla, despite a protective order being filed. Communication gaps between the sheriff's office and local police department meant that the restraining order wasn't properly enforced. This failure to act decisively gave Harmon time to plan his next move. In domestic violence cases, repeated delays can embolden perpetrators and convince victims that reporting is futile. Jamilla's friends later revealed that she considered withdrawing her complaint because she felt nothing was being done. Additionally, lack of coordinated support systems left Jamilla vulnerable. There was no formal safety plan established, no emergency relocation assistance, and no consistent welfare checks after the initial report. These oversights reflect broader deficiencies in how rural and suburban jurisdictions handle intimate partner violence, often treating them as isolated disputes rather than escalating threats to life. The justice system's slow response inadvertently allowed a volatile situation to reach its breaking point. Fear plays a defining role in why victims like Jamilla often minimize danger or delay leaving. In interviews following her death, relatives said Jamilla was trying to keep peace for the sake of her children. Like many survivors, she believed compliance might prevent violence. Domestic violence specialists emphasize that this silence is a survival tactic. Victims often assess risk daily and make decisions not from weakness but from necessity. Leaving without protection can trigger lethal retaliation. As statistics show, most domestic violence homicides occur within weeks of a victim attempting to leave. Jamilla's silence wasn't acceptance. It was fear. She had reportedly told a co-worker that she planned to start fresh after the holidays, once she felt safe enough to move away. However, Harmon's awareness of her intentions likely triggered his final act of rage. Experts suggest that intervention must focus not only on punishing abusers, but on breaking the silence cycle. Through confidential reporting lines, proactive police follow-ups, and mandatory welfare checks once abuse is documented. In Jamilla's case, these mechanisms either failed or were never activated. Her reluctance to expose Harmon's violence in full detail stemmed from fear of retaliation and lack of faith in protection systems. That silence ultimately became part of what cost her life. Despite Harmon's arrest and the recovery of Jamilla's remains, several aspects of the case remain unresolved. Did Harmon act alone at the time of the murder? While Harmon has been charged with murder and concealment of a body, investigators believe at least one individual may have helped dispose of Jamilla's remains. Surveillance footage and phone records are being examined to determine potential accomplices. What was the exact timeline between the 911 call and the shooting? Dispatch records confirm a 911 call placed by Jamilla shortly before her death. The duration between her plea for help and the moment she was shot remains under review. Delays in response time could prove critical in determining whether she might have been saved. Could police have prevented the death after the November assault report? The gap between the initial complaint and follow-up action raises significant procedural concerns. Had Harmon been detained immediately or subjected to closer monitoring, the fatal incident might have been avoided. What drove Harmon's accomplices to help him conceal the crime? Alleged accomplices, if confirmed, could have been motivated by fear, loyalty, or coercion. Investigators continue to trace communications to understand whether they knowingly assisted in the aftermath or were misled. Are there undisclosed motives, jealousy, revenge, or control? While jealousy is a recurring theme, court documents suggest possible financial disputes as well. Jamilla was reportedly preparing to move and start a new job, a decision that may have further provoked Harmon's insecurities. Each unanswered question points to deeper systemic and psychological elements, the intersections of control, fear, and institutional failure that define this tragedy. Jamilla Shanae Smith's death forces confrontation with a painful truth. Love can become a weapon when control replaces compassion. Her story transcends a single act of violence. It reflects the fragile boundaries between affection and domination that often remain hidden until it's too late. The final 911 call, now preserved in evidence, captures Jamilla's last moments, a woman fighting for her life in a situation that had escalated beyond help. It serves as both a record of her courage and a haunting reminder of the system's shortcomings. Her case has since sparked renewed conversations about domestic violence reform in South Carolina, particularly regarding arrest timelines, cross-departmental communication, and victim safety protocols. Yet for Jamilla's family, closure remains distant. The courtroom proceedings may deliver legal justice, but emotional resolution is harder to achieve. What remains is a story that compels recognition, a mirror reflecting the darkness that can grow within love and the silence that allows it to thrive. Jamilla's story is no longer just about her death. It is a lesson in prevention, a demand for reform, and a stark reminder that behind every statistic lies a life once full of hope. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.